back to Tech. In today's tutorial, we'll be going over functions in Python. This tutorial is a continuation of our Python series, so if you haven't begun watching from the beginning, you can go back and refer to the other videos that we did. So today, as I said, we'll be going over functions in Python. So let's get to know what are functions. So a function is a block of reusable code that is only executed when called. So it is just a block of code that won't be executed by the Python interpreter unless it is called, and it can be called in different places. Hence it is reusable. So let's see what we actually mean by a function. So I have opened here Visual Studio Code. So I have created a file named functions.py. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to look at is how to create a function. So to create a function in Python, we use the def keyword. So def, you can think of it like definition and then the function name. So let's say func name and then the parenthesis and then a colon and then we tab. So we come on the next line and then we press space 4 times or one single tab. Okay, so let's go over it again. The def keyword, the name of the function, the parenthesis, the colon, and then we indent where we write our expression. So this is a function, but this function does nothing. So when I run this code right now, we'll get an error. Okay, so when you create an empty function in Python, you need to use the pass keyword in the place of expressions so that Python can know that this is an empty function. So if you run this, we will not get an error. Okay, so if you create an empty function, we use the pass keyword. So this is how to create an empty function in Python. So the purpose of function is not to make them to be empty, but to make them to do something. So let's create a function. This function, its work is to print hello. So a simple function, its work is to print hello. So if you run this code, we won't get any error. Okay, because it has an expression. So if you have an expression, we don't need to use the pass keyword. Okay, so now how do we call this function? Because if you run this code right now, it does nothing despite the fact that we want to print hello. So to call a function, this is known as calling a function. So it's with the function name and then parenthesis. So this is how we call a function. So whenever Python reaches here, it identifies that this is a function but does not execute it. But if you reach to this line 6, we can find that we are calling the function by using the name of the function followed by parentheses. So Python will execute the function. So if I run this, we'll get hello, which we get here. So we can call this function multiple times. So I can copy this and paste it a couple of times. So each time the function is called, is going to print hello, hello. That's why we get this number of hellos, which is equivalent to the number of times we call the function. So that's what we mean by functions are reusable. We mean that you can use them in multiple places within your code. Okay, so this is the advantage of functions, is that instead of writing code all over many times, like here we write print hello 4 times, instead we write it once and we call it. Now in this example, you might find that it doesn't give us like a lot of advantages because it is writing a print statement. But in the normal world, when you're creating a program, functions can be many lines long, up to 50, 100 and so on, etc. So a function can be infinite lines long. So calling it will save you a lot of time instead of writing the same thing over and over again. So this is the main idea of a function. So let's move on to parameters and arguments. So parameters and arguments, what is the difference? Most people, they confuse this term between the difference between a parameter and an argument. Okay, so the difference between a parameter, there's a great difference between a parameter and an argument, but these terms, they are very interlinked. Means that they almost mean the same thing but in different contexts. Okay, so for example, let's create a program that will take in a user's name and then greet the user, say maybe hello James, hello John. Okay, so let's create such a program. So we are going to pass in here, we're going to say name. Okay, so let me just write this and I explain to you. So func name and I pass in maybe here James. Okay, so up here we have used name, and then down here we have used James. So up here, this is a parameter, while this is an argument. So a parameter is just a variable in which the argument will be stored when the function is called. Okay, so now let's try to use an f string here, f, and then we'll try to print hello and then the name of the person. Okay, so this is the parameter while this is the argument. So a parameter is basically a variable within that the function takes in, that is used to store or to refer to the arguments when they are passed. Okay, so this is a parameter while this is an argument. So when you pass in James, James will be stored in name. So when you call this function, James will be stored in name, so it will print hello and then James. So now let's call another same function twice. Let's pass in another name, maybe John. Okay, so if you call James, James will pass into name and name will be printed, and then hello James will be printed. If you pass in John, John will be passed into name, and John will be hello John will be printed. So this is the parameter which is used to store these arguments. Okay, so this is the parameter while this is the argument. So if I run this code right now, you can see we get hello James and hello John. So this is the parameter, this is the argument. Okay, so let's move on to, and by the way, these are known as positional arguments. So we can have here another parameter, maybe say age or location. So we'll print the name and then we'll print the location where the person stays, location. Okay, so in here we're also supposed to pass in the location. Maybe the location is in Africa, and then this way the location will be in the US. Okay, so this is a positional arguments. Name will be stored in name according to their position. So Africa will be stored in location, US will also be stored in location, John will be stored in name. So this will be stored here and this will be stored in here according to their position. That's why they're known as positional arguments. Okay, so if I run this code, we'll get James and then Africa and then John and then US. Okay, so that's what we get. So now if I change the position of name, let's put in your location, and in here we'll put in name. Okay, so now I have exchanged the two places, meaning that James will become location. Okay, so when you run this code, we'll get hello Africa, because Africa is hello Africa, then James. Okay, so let's run this. Okay, so you get hello Africa, hello James. So these are positional arguments. When you change their positions, this also will change, okay, in the terms of where you use them. So these are positional arguments. So let's move on to something else, maybe to avoid this confusion. Maybe a person does not know whether names come before location. So to avoid this confusion, there's another concept known as keyword arguments. So keyword argument, you use keywords to refer to those variables. So I want to refer to James as the name, so I can simply type in your name and then I'll assign it to James, and then I'll come in here and I'll also say location and I'll assign it to Africa. Now this will avoid the error. We see hello James and hello and then Africa, but in the second one it is still the same with that same error. So that's why this is why we use keyword arguments. Sorry, so we can also use here the same name, and you can also use here even if you don't use your location, it will still be assigned to location. We get an error. Positional argument follows. Okay, so now to prevent this, Python does not allow this to happen. So if you're using positional keyword arguments and positional variables or arguments, the first thing that needs to come is the positional arguments or the positional variable followed by the keyword argument. So I'll just copy this and I'll paste it, delete this, and then I'll paste it here. So let's run this again and let's see what we get. You see we get everything is fixed. So the US has been assigned to location, since name, yes, we have explicitly said that name John is actually a name argument. So this is a keyword variable length, keywords or keyword arguments. Okay, so these are positional arguments and keyword arguments. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on to arbitrary keyword arguments. Arbitrary keyword arguments. So for example, you want to create a program that will take in input from the user, but you are not sure how many variables or keywords the user is going to input. So for example, if you are only expecting name, okay, let me delete location. Our program is only expecting the name argument, keyword argument when it is called, but here down we can see we are passing in location. So if you run this, we will print an error. Okay, so to prevent this, but let's just show you the error for once. It's saying got unexpected keyword argument location. So it's getting many arguments, but you're expecting only name. So to prevent this, we can just simply do this. You can say the asterisk twice, and then you can leave it any variable names. But by convention, people they use quags. Quag stands for keyword arguments. Okay, so quags. So if you use quags, this will return to us. Let me just print out the quags so that you can see. Okay, so I print out quags. So here I'll give it location. So let's run this, and then we see what we get as quags. So the first we got a dictionary, right? You can see it is a dictionary. If you didn't watch the video on our data types, you can go back and refer to that. So it has a dictionary. The first key is name and its value is James, and the second key is location, is value in Africa, and then you can see location and then the US, and the same thing. Okay, so it stands to us a dictionary with a key value pair relationship, whereby the keys are the keyword arguments, the keywords, and then the values are the actual data that we pass in, the parameters, the arguments, sorry. So to work with this, you know that dictionaries are iterable, so we can iterate through this and print out the data that you want. So for example, you can just print from, let's say, for location, comma name in quags. So quags, sorry, so just print, let's use an F string. So you can input here, you can print hello, and then the name. So this in here, you can put in the name, and then we can place in the location. Okay, so we can print in the name and the location. So let's run this. We see we got an error. Why did we get that error? Let's examine this. Let's change this one here. So I'll remove all of this. This should be location. This should be, sorry, let me just remove this line, and then we see why we're getting that error. So it's saying too many values to unpack, expect 2, or too many values to unpack. So location, name. Okay, so it's my bad, so I forgot to do something. So in here it's supposed to say dot keys dot items. Okay, we have already discussed this in our data type video, so you can go back and refer to that. So in here I'll just specify that this is the name. So if I run this, we get hello James from this place, and then that one. Okay, we're getting a duplicate of it, hello James, and location Africa, US location Africa. Okay, that's how we can print out those values out. So we get the name and then the values, and then we can print them out. Okay, so that's how we can work with keyword variable arguments. The main point to know that it returns a dictionary, and that dictionary contains a key and a value pair relationship, whereby the keys are the keywords and then the values are the actual arguments that we pass to those keywords. Okay, so this brings us to the end of that. So let's move on to variable length arguments. So for example, I'll just get rid of all of this. So we'll have a function, we'll call it sum. So this function takes in numbers, number 1 and number 2. So it takes in two numbers and returns to us, it prints out the sum of those numbers. So prints out the sum of those numbers, number 1 plus number 2. Okay, so that's what our function does. So let's call it here, so sum, and we pass in 10, 20. Okay, so if we run this right now, we should get 30, and we got 30. Okay, so this is a simple, maybe you can think of it like a simple calculator that takes in two values from the user and adds them together and prints out the sum of the two numbers. So in some cases, what maybe a user does not know that your calculator expects two numbers. Maybe he wants to add this and this. He wants to add up all these numbers, but your program expects only two numbers. So how do we get around this? To get around this, we use the concept of variable length arguments. So variable length arguments in Python basically means that we can take more than one argument at more than one argument. Okay, so now let's try this. So let's try to print out numbers. So let's try to print out numbers and see what we get. We'll get a tuple of all the numbers that you have passed in here. And again, you have discussed this in our data structure topic, so you can refer back to what is a tuple. So we know that tuples are iterables, right? So we can iterate through them using a for loop. So for number in numbers, okay, they get this correct. For number in numbers, we will say sum plus equals to number. So we'll create a variable here, sum, and we will initialize it to 0. So sum by initialization is 0. So we'll loop through it and take each number and then add it. You can notice that I'm using here the augmented assignment operator, which is known as this is because of how memories is allocated every time to a new variable. So you can refer, we already discussed this when you're discussing variables and about memory and stuff, so you can refer back to that tutorial and watch why I'm using plus equals to. I won't explain this over here, so let's just go on. So we'll loop through each number, take each number and then add it up to 0. So the first will be 10, 0 plus 10 to be 10, 10 plus 20, 30, and then so on, 60, and then 110, 90. Yeah, so we get that. So we can work with variable length argument. So we just put an asterisk and then that. So there's a striking similarity between keyword arguments and arbitrary keyword arguments and variable length arguments. So arbitrary keyword arguments use double asterisks, while variable length argument only use one asterisk. Okay, so that's the difference. So let's go to default arguments. Okay, so now let me just remove this. So let's take in a function that takes in, call it age. It takes in your age and then prints it out. Print out age. Okay, so let's give it a more meaningful name. So print age. Let's call it print underscore age. Okay, so this function just prints out your age. So let's call it here print underscore age, and then we pass in maybe 50. So when you pass in 50 right now, if you print, you're going to get 50 on the screen. So what the function basically does. So let's imagine that a person didn't specify, maybe our program is not compulsory that you pass in your age. Maybe you're creating something like maybe a website or something that is not compulsory to someone to pass in their age. Okay, so if you run this right now, we'll get an error. So how, maybe you want to create a program whereby if a person doesn't assign his age, he's at least 0 years old, because each person is at least 0 years old. Okay, so if you run this, if you didn't specify your age, it will print 0. So that is known as a default value or default value arguments. Okay, default value arguments. So then the name parameter, it has a default value of name. So even if you didn't specify in here an argument, the default value will be used. So if you specify here an argument, the default value will be overridden. So if I write this, we get 50. Okay, that's what's known as default value argument. So let's move on to recursion. So Recursion is a very important topic when it comes to functions. So let's get rid of all of this. So let's create a function which would take dash print. Let's call it take and print, because this function will take in an let's just call it printer. Okay, let's just call it printer. So this function does take in your input. Okay, you take in your input, maybe tell me your name. So take in your name, we'll store this in okay, store this name. Okay, so it gets that name and then it prints out your name on the screen. Okay, that's what this function that is called printer. It takes in your name and then prints your name out on the screen. So let's just call it here printer. So let me run the code and then see what we get. So we get tell me your name. I'll say my name maybe is James, so I get James. Okay, now let's move on to recursion. So recursion is basically a function calling itself within itself. So I know it's confusing, let me just write it, maybe you can understand better. So printer, instead of me calling this function outside, I'm calling the function within itself. So when you execute this code, this line will call this function. This function will take in your input and then print it out, and then this function will call itself again. So it will come back up here, taking your name and print it out. So you can see that this will go into an infinite loop. But in Python there is something known as recursion limit, so it will prevent your code from going into an infinite loop, because infinite loops are a very confusing topic, and if you don't understand them, you can easily run into infinite loops that are bad for your program and bad for your hardware. Both hardware is bad for both hardware and software, so be careful when using recursions. So let me run this. You can see as for my name, I'll say James, and then ask again for my name, James. So this will continue infinitely, James. So this is a recursion. So recursion is basically a function calling itself. Okay, so it's a function that calls itself within itself. So this is what a recursion is. Okay, so I hope you get the point. So now let's move on to return statements. So let's remove all of this, just leave the rest. So let's say this function takes in your name, and we don't want to do anything with your name, just want to return it out to the person who called the function, or to the caller of the function. So we'll say return then name. So if I call this function here, if I call this function printer, it doesn't take in any parameters. So it takes, we are calling the function here, but we are equalizing that function to a variable named username. Why? Because this function, when it's finished taking your username, is going to return it. So when it returns it, you are storing it in this variable called username. Okay, so now if I print username, what do you think we'll get? So let's run this. So it's asking for my name, I'll say James. So it has printed out James, but how did it work? So this line calls our function. It comes up here, they'll ask you for your input, you get the input, you give it the input, press enter, it returns it. It returns it to the caller. The caller of this function is username, so that value of name is stored in username, and you are simply printing out that username. Okay, so that's how you can work with return statements. So for example, it's not necessary that we store it in a variable, we can use it to perform a certain function. Okay, so let's remove this. So let's just print it out directly on the screen. So print, and then we'll say printer, we'll call it printer, I think like that, so I got the spelling wrong, printer, like that. So if I run this, ask for my name, I'll say James. Okay, so you get James, so it's the same thing. So it returns James, and you're simply printing out James. Okay, that's what a return statement does. So for example, let's say let's use the same name, printer. So let's take in int. I'm converting this into an int, but I'm just going to change this in a while. So instead of saying tell me your name, tell me your age. Okay, so now we'll say if the age is greater than maybe 18, we'll print adult. Sorry, else we want to print maybe child. Okay, so our program, so we want to write this expression, takes in an age and then sees that if the age is actually greater than 18 or equals, this should be greater or equals to 18. If it's greater or equals to 18, it prints out adult, or else it prints out child. Okay, and then again you have done over what logic for loops, I mean if conditionals, and else you have already done that. So if you haven't watched that tutorial, you can refer back to this series. We have done it. So let's run the program. So if you run this right now, it will give us an error. So this program printer is going to return to you the age. So we are checking if that age is greater than 18. So we are in here supposed to call in our printer function. This return to us the age, and then we check if the age is greater than 18 or equals to 18. We say adult, or else we print child. So for my age, I'll say maybe 18. Let's get adult. Okay, so it returns a function which will be placed in here. Okay, that's what the return statement does. Okay, so let's run again, and then I'll put in maybe 4, 5. Okay. We get child. So that's our return statement work in Python. So this is the basics of how functions work and how you can call functions in multiple places as many times as you want, and prevents you from writing the same thing over and over again. Basically, it follows the dry principle. The dry principle says for do not repeat yourself. So basically, a function does not prevents us from repeating ourselves, gives us more reusability, and can have code that does not get executed unless we call it. So that is the basics of a function. So thanks for watching. This brings us to the end of this tutorial. So if you have not subscribed, please like, subscribe, and share my videos. If you have any question, you can follow me on Instagram at FreezoTech, or you can leave a comment in the comment section below. I'll do my best to get back to you. Thanks for watching.